conclude, I once again thank all the member states for their immense support and cooperation. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. I would now request Chairperson of the Eminent Persons Group to please present his report. Dr. Rohan Pereira.
Mr. Secretary General, distinguished delegates, I am pleased to present the report of the third meeting of the EPG, which I was honored to chair, and held on Sunday, the 8th of September. This meeting was attended by His Excellency Professor Dr. Rahmat Mohammed, Secretary General of ALCO, His Excellency Dr. Abdullah Muhammad Saidi, Minister of Legal Affairs of the Sultanate of Oman, Dr. Neeru Chadha, Joint Secretary and Legal Advisor, Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, Mr. Narendra Singh, Member of the International Law Commission, India, the three Deputy Secretaries General of ALCO, Dr. Hassan Suleiman, Dr. Fukahori, and Mr. Fang King Hu, Mr. Salim Hamid Al-Batashi, Minister Plenipotentiary of the Embassy of the Sultanate of Oman, New Delhi, Mrs. Anuradha Bakshi, Principal Legal Officer, ALCO, and Mr. Mahesh Menon, Legal Officer, ALCO, assisted the EPG. The meeting had before it the paper entitled Points for Discussion, which had been circulated, highlighting the important issues that had been discussed with a view to advancing the work of the organization. The issues were divided into organizational and substantive matters to facilitate focused and structured discussion. The chairman drew the attention of the EPG to the need to chart out a mechanism to implement the recommendations of the EPG. The meeting decided that the Secretary General should make a separate communication to the member states, bringing to their attention the recommendations made by the EPG and seek their response. In making such recommendations to member states, the Secretary General should identify those recommendations which could be implemented in the short, medium, and the long term. I now come to organizational matters. Firstly, financial issues, which of course is a matter that has been discussed in the plenary. The Secretariat proposal on the increase in the annual contribution of member states from 2014. The EPG took note of the Secretary General's statement about the mandate received at the 51st annual session held in Abuja to study the human resources and financial situation of the organization and the subcommittee that was constituted for this purpose. The EPG further took note of the draft budget prepared for 2014 and the proposed increase in contribution of member states, which was to be presented to the annual session. The EPG, whilst recognizing the identified needs for increased contributions, taking into account in particular the need to strengthen the professional and the legal staff of the Secretariat to discharge the functions that are to be performed by this organization, and also the challenges posed by the high inflation rate in Delhi, took the view that this issue should be the subject of careful consideration by member states, taking into account all aspects of the matter and reach an appropriate decision And as I mentioned, of course, this matter was discussed in the plenary after the EPG session. I now come to the second item under organizational matters, status of annual contributions of member states. The EPG took note of the overall improvement in the status of annual contributions of member states and the fact that several member states had paid their arrears pursuant to arduous efforts put in by the Secretary General and the Secretariat. The Secretary General reported that the financial situation of the organization was better than before, with only about 13 member states in arrears. He further reported that 3 of the member states had requested for either a reduction or a waiver of the outstanding arrears. He further reported that, the EPG was of the view that such a practice would not be an appropriate one and that it would be against the interests of those member states who make regular and timely payments, and that it would also set a bad precedent and could result in further defaults. It was stated that it is more appropriate to grant such members in arrears more time and the facility to pay the arrears in installments rather than agree to any complete waiver or reduction. The EPG further recommended that a formula providing, for example, freezing of arrears and for deferred payment could be worked out. Further, the feasibility of these states in arrears assisting the organization in other ways, such as hosting and funding a particular meeting or specific workshops, need to be explored. Next, I come to the staffing of the Secretariat. The EPG reiterated the need for the strengthening of the professional legal category of staff of the Secretariat in order to enable the organization to discharge the substantive responsibilities as envisaged in the statute, and recall the recommendation made at the 51st Abuja session that member states depute officials and or experts to the Secretariat who would remain on the payroll of the deputing member states. The EPG recognized that in order to attract the best available talent, the salary being offered must be on par with what is being offered in universities in New Delhi and that of the government of India. The EPG also recommended that the possibility of recruiting interns from the universities be also pursued to augment the present professional staff in the Secretariat. While noting that this process had been already initiated, the EPG underlined the importance of continuing and strengthening this process, even though internships by its very nature may be for a short-term duration. The EPG also recommended that vacancies that have arisen out of the resignation of legal officers could be filled without delay by the Secretary General, without seeking a fresh mandate from member states, provided that such recruitments are reported to the member states. The SG also informed the EPG that all the present Deputy Secretaries General were from the Asian region, and that African and Arab states need to be encouraged to depute personnel from these countries to ensure balanced regional representation. The EPG agreed that this should receive the early attention of the member states from the relevant regions. The EPG also reiterated its previous recommendation on the need to depute ALCO staff member or members to attend the sessions of the International Law Commission with a view to strengthening the ALCO-ILC relationship. This could be on a need basis in respect of select topics of particular interest to member states in the Asian African region. It was also pointed out that sponsorship for this purpose could be sought from member states and from other sources. The EPG also pointed out that several topics currently being considered by the ILC, which were discussed last morning, question of immunity of state officials from foreign criminal jurisdiction, protection of victims of disasters, and the formation and evidence of customary international law, were of significant importance to member states who needed to be sensitized about these topics. The Secretariat staff who are assigned to follow the ILC session could play a vital role in this regard and also assist ILC members from the Asian African region in the proceedings of the Commission. On the issue of reviewing progress on improving communication with member states, the Secretary General informed the EPG that the website of the organization had been updated and improved, and that through this website, the organization had sought responses from member states on some of the substantive matters, as well as the addresses for communication to ensure dialogue with the focal points. It was reported, however, that the response of the member states to both these matters was not forthcoming. This needs to be reiterated and followed up. The EPG recommended in this regard that the practice adopted by the Office of the UN Legal Council of preparing a list of legal advisors of member states and regularly updating the list through circulation amongst member states could usefully be adopted by ALCO. I now turn to the question of enlarging the membership of the organization. The Secretary General reported that during informal discussions, several states such as Congo, Vietnam, Mozambique, Papua New Guinea, and South Sudan had expressed their desire to be members of the organization. However, no formal application for membership had been received so far. It was further reported that the Secretary General had suggested that these and other states become observers initially and thereafter come forward seeking membership if they found that to be useful and in their interest. The EPG reiterated its previous recommendation that given the substantive diplomatic presence in New Delhi, the Secretary General undertake an initiative in the host state to attract wider membership. While such a process would be cost-effective, the EPG recognized that if an approach to a particular state